Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
It was a messy, chaotic coaching cycle in the NFL. Now that the dust has settled, how exactly did we get here? Also, the USA men's hockey team opened the Winter Olympics with a convincing win, and Justin Herbert is primed to win the NFL MVP next season? I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Now that the NFL coaching musical chairs have stopped, how did we get in such a uniquely crazy coaching cycle? NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport joined me to talk about how this year got so wild. All right, we're here at Radio Row, San Francisco, Super Bowl 60. Ian Rappaport from NFL Media. Ian, 10 teams changed coaches this cycle.
Don't remind me.
And we thought this was going to be kind of a boring cycle. There weren't all these sexy names. Why did we get here?
So, kind of taking a look at what the landscape of this thing, it felt to me like teams were kind of going through it. They're figuring out what they wanted to do. We thought it would be maybe 6 or 7, and then the Ravens fired John Herbert. And that, to me, felt a little bit like a signal to teams like, all right, hang on. Like, if you think being just okay is good enough, it's not good enough for the Ravens, so maybe it shouldn't be good enough for us. And, 2 days later, the Dolphins fired Mike McDaniel, and everyone thought it was to hire Harbaugh, but I thought it was more, and they never ended up interviewing him, I thought it was more like, all right, this is not good enough, and we need to take note of what other teams are doing, and I think that led to a couple more firings.
Okay, so how many, the Ravens make this move for John Harbaugh, how many teams, how many coaches do you think could have that ripple effect around the league? There can't be that many, right? 5 or 6
not
maybe?
Not that many, but John Harbaugh was an institution. Super Bowl winner, more than a decade, in the playoffs every year, except for this year. It's when that happens, it's really anything can happen. And I think that's sort of what this search told me. It's I remember waking up the morning after the Bills lost in the playoffs. And there'd been really, after they won the first game, really no discussion of would Sean McDermott get fired. Right. But in my head, I'm I think something's going to happen. Understanding the landscape, they don't seem happy. Were they good enough? I don't know. And I'm I got to be honest. And we ended up breaking it because I was this feels like teams are not settling at all this year. Now, we'll see if they got it right, but not settling at all.
Yeah, very much TBD on that. It seems like the Seahawks in the Super Bowl led to multiple ripple effect firings. It seemed like Sam Darnold was, at least in part, directly what happened with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in Minnesota. And then Mike Macdonald, I think it would be rational to just say, we let that guy out of the building. Maybe, am I connecting too many dots here?
No, I don't think the Ravens fired Harbaugh because they let Mike Macdonald out of the building, but I do think for teams that, want the hot young offensive coach, some of those teams are all right, hang on. This is a non-yelling, non-theatrical, young defensive mind who is brilliant, who can communicate, who is a leader. That's what it should be, And it's hard to find those guys, but it felt like that's what the Ravens were at least looking for. I think that's what the Dolphins were looking for. It doesn't matter if it's offense or whatever. It's really just can you find someone to lead your team? And I wonder about say teams like the Commanders. Yeah. End up hiring Dan Quinn. Obviously did great last year. This year not as good. They had a chance to hire Mike Macdonald and didn't. I wonder if they're maybe we should. So, it's tough to know what's right. It really is.
And look, no team knows when they hire a coach. If they're you think you're hiring the best guy, that's part of the deal.
I always think about when the Packers hired Matt. Yeah. I thought it was crazy. Yeah. He was a coordinator whose job status was up in the air in Tennessee. I thought it was crazy, and he is an excellent football player.
So with all of the flux then, I look at the 22 other teams, and I feel like in their building, they could say, well, our continuity is actually a benefit to us moving forward then.
Yeah, I think it's more like, do we have a guy who can get us to where we need to go? You know, because like kids now, players now are accustomed to change. They can change all the time. They transfer from place to place. Everyone has a new coordinator, it seems, every year. Half the league has a new coordinator. So, like, I don't know how much continuity there is. I think it's more like, do we have a guy or do we not have a guy? And so the Packers discourse was interesting. Like, I reported the Saturday before their playoff game, they're going to work out a new contract with him. And it seems like, and I was like, yeah, like, they're going to work. And people were still like, we'll see what happens. And I'm like, he's coming back because, like, he's a guy who can take you to the Super Bowl.
But did your perspective change the way that they lost that Bears? Okay.
No, not at all. I mean, like,
is it because they're not a reactionary franchise, or?
No, I think he's the guy. You know, like, I just never. No one ever told me. No one ever gave me any indication that there was anything but full-throated support of Matt LaFleur. And so even though they lost, you know, I didn't scramble around calling everyone. I was like, trust what people have told me. Like, he's coming back.
And like, I think for Green Bay, to me, the reason I asked the continuity question is if you're the Packers, you have, like, windows in the NFL are, what, 3 years max most of the time?
Yeah.
To change midstream, like, if you're Buffalo, that's a big risk. If you're Baltimore, that's a big risk.
Right. But, you know, they have talent. And if you believe in the talent you have and find good coaching, you can do it. But, like, you know, I think the Bills will go to the playoffs next year. But they might not. And, excuse me. But they might not. And so it's like, you know, you fired Sean McDermott. That's a huge risk. It'll either pay off. Like when the Denver Broncos did it with John Fox to Gary Kubiak.
Yeah.
I think people are like, hold on, you just fired a coach who was in the AFC title game or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, and then they win the Super Bowl next year.
Stay up to date all year on the NFL by subscribing to Locked On NFL on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Your Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the USA men's hockey team put together an impressive performance. Before we get to that, Trinidad Chambliss has been granted a 6th year of eligibility for now. The Winter Games are officially here. And if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get on the biggest stage every 4 years. That's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Both popular and niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better place or way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss has been granted an injunction by a judge giving him a 6th season of eligibility. For now, the NCAA is likely to appeal, but as it stands today, Chambliss will be back in Oxford this fall. Over on the hardwood, these boys better stop tanking because the NBA is fed up. Utah and Indiana were just fined $500,000 and $100,000 after the league determined each team sat healthy players in recent games. Commissioner Adam Silver didn't dance around it either, prioritizing draft position over winning, quote, undermines the foundation of NBA competition. With the 2026 draft class already hyped as a potential franchise-altering one for several teams, the teams that get the top picks, of course, the league clearly isn't interested in a race to the bottom, or at least don't make it that obvious. Come on, guys. A tough blow for the North Carolina men's basketball team on Thursday. UNC announced star forward Caleb Wilson has fractured his hand with no timetable for return.
Huge breaking news out of Chapel Hill. Caleb Wilson has a fracture in his left hand that he suffered Tuesday night in the game at Miami. We obviously all know he went to the locker room, came back out with it wrapped, and played some more. Per Carolina's release, they did x-rays that were negative, so that's why he went back in. But when they got back to Chapel Hill, more testing revealed that there was a fracture. There's no timetable announced yet as they continue to figure things out, Carolina says. And so we'll find out what that is. You know, you would imagine somewhere in around 4 weeks would be my guess. In the meantime, everyone has to step up as Carolina has a very difficult stretch down the rest of the regular season, 7 games to go. Huge, devastating news for Carolina. Got to hold the ship afloat until Caleb gets back, hopefully in time for the postseason, but we'll find out. For now, though, peace.
Team USA men's hockey scored an emphatic 5-1 win over Latvia to kick off the winter games. Locked On NHL Squad Show hosts Gil Martin and Ian McLaren reacted to the hot start on the ice.
All right, guys. Team USA also had their first game. Looked pretty darn good against Latvia. What stood out, Zach, to you most about Team USA?
I mean, before we get things going, oh, mama, don't you cry. Oh, okay, I had to get that out of the way. Now, with that being said, it was the fourth line. There was a lot of, needless to say, controversy about, Brock Nelson on this team, JT Miller on this team. Why is Jack Hughes on the fourth line? They were the best offensive line by far for the Americans today. Brock Nelson and Jack Hughes look like they've been playing together their whole lives, which is crazy because Brock Nelson looks like he's 60.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you see a Jack Hughes on the fourth line, and he looked way better. Obviously, Four Nations didn't go so well for him, and I think if the U.S. want to go far in this tournament, they're going to need a guy like Jack Hughes to be not on the fourth line at some point. I think it's nice to have him, that depth, but I think he's got a lot more to give to this team. And I think you probably are going to see him move up at some point. But I mean, also the Quinn Hughes factor. Like, they didn't have Quinn Hughes last year. Mm-hmm. When you have a Quinn Hughes on your team, you're going to be a better team. And it showed. I think maybe Team USA is going to have to learn a little bit about the rules and the WIHF when it comes to players in the crease, because we know they like to play that tough as nails style, get in the kitchen and all that stuff. But WIHF, I mean, look, as a Canadian watching those goals get called back, but then the goal against Canada the other day not get called back, it just goes to show that the international officiating still has some kinks to work out. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure the U.S. are going to realize, okay, we can play tough, but we have to be. There's some areas you're going to have to work on there. But I mean, that's a team that looks ready to go. Guys who probably either were missing from the last year's tournament or didn't have their best performance. They know that they gotta get off to a good start here, and they certainly did today.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been made of JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck being on the team instead of guys like Jason Robertson or Cole Caulfield. And you could kind of see why in today's game, talking about like the toughness, how hard they play. I think Chris Cuthbert mentioned it on the Canadian broadcast, where those two Rangers specifically were brought in for kind of that penalty killing expertise as well. So you're kind of balancing out that toughness with a couple guys who will be out on the ice in those key moments. Whereas if you had Robertson, Caulfield, obviously would add to the talent level, but if you're getting into penalty trouble or it's a physical game, maybe those guys are kind of lost in that mix. So Team USA looked so good, so deep on the blue line. Yeah, they probably have the better blue line top to bottom. If you can roll out like Quinn Hughes, Zach Werenski, Charlie McAvoy as your top three guys getting the most minutes, you're in a pretty good spot. Connor Hellebuck, he's had his struggles this year as well, but he's the reigning MVP, Vezina Trophy winner. It feels like it's a Canada-USA kind of on a collision course. That's what everybody wants in the gold medal game. And really, through the first games for every country, I don't think there's any reason to doubt that that's kind of where we're headed in this tournament.
Were you guys at all surprised by the physicality that we've seen so far? I mean, we saw it at the Four Nations a year ago, but historically, the Olympics are not quite as physical as, let's say, NHL hockey. Are you surprised at the physicality?
No, not in the slightest. These guys have been waiting, 12 years to be back on this stage in this moment? If you're a fan, you've been chomping at the bit. Imagine if you play the sport for a living. Of course, you want to go out, represent your country, kick the crap out of whoever's standing next to you on the ice. Like, maybe it's just the evolution of the sport, and maybe the days of the Olympics being more finesse oriented might just be, I don't want to say completely over, but evolving.
Stay up to date all year on the NHL and Olympic hockey by subscribing to Locked On NHL on your favorite podcast app. Coming up, Justin Herbert is set to win the MVP. There have been a lot of what-if hypotheticals surrounding Justin Herbert's career thus far with the Chargers. However, Locked On NFL host Tyler Rowland and Michelle Majic believe that there are no ifs, ands, or buts about Herbert being set to win MVP this upcoming season.
How do you feel about my Justin Herbert MVP pick?
I feel like this is something that everyone wants to happen every single offseason, right? We want Justin Herbert to be this top 3 guy in the league. We want the Chargers to be better than they are, and it just never happens. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's more likely that maybe Joe Burrow could come forward and win before Herbert, but I actually have a much crazier pick on my end.
I love the crazy. All I would say is this on the Herbert front. I thought he played good football after his offensive line fell apart. I think that was more of a problem than him. I think he does have all the talent in the world. And you're right. He hasn't put it together yet. But if the Chargers can win the division next year, if they can win 13, 14 games, if the offensive line stays healthy with Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt back at full strength, they add more pieces. Mike McDaniel, in my opinion, much better offensive mind than Greg Roman. I just think we could see Herbert actually get to that next level eventually. But I understand the concerns, and I understand Herbert has his skeptics out there. So
how about this? Just be a top 5 quarterback in any of the efficiency metrics one time. It has been years since Justin Herbert has actually produced like anything close to an MVP level quarterback. Justin Herbert is incredible. Let me say that and be clear about it. I think Justin Herbert is an awesome quarterback. Your job is to produce. And I understand the offensive line was a nightmare last year. I understand your offensive coordinator got fired. I understand inconsistencies at receiver. Drake May, for my money, should have been the MVP. His pass protection, not materially better. His receivers, I would argue, worse than what Justin Herbert was working with. And Josh McDaniels, look, he's won a lot of Super Bowls as the offensive coordinator, but that's Tom Brady, that's Bill Belichick. How much credit does Josh McDaniels really get for all of that? How much better a circumstance was Drake May in than Justin Herbert? Drake May led the league in EPA per dropback last year with all of the issues. I understand he had an easy schedule, but come on. Led the league. Justin Herbert, well below average in EPA per dropback. Everyone loves the talent. Everyone, me too. I love the talent. I was higher on Justin Herbert coming out of college than most people. I was an early Justin Herbert adopter. But at a certain point, you have to produce like an elite quarterback to be an elite quarterback. And we're like going on 3 straight years of non-elite production. And until we see that player, like the MVP talk has got to be on hold. And finally, Nikola Topic finally stepped onto an NBA floor Thursday night, and it meant a whole lot more than 2 points in the box score. The 12th pick in the 2024 draft made his debut for Oklahoma City after missing his entire rookie season with a knee injury and then battling testicular cancer this preseason. He underwent a procedure in October, completed chemotherapy, and worked his way all the way back. When he checked in late in the first quarter against Milwaukee, the crowd rose to its feet. Early in the second, he knocked down a jumper near the free throw line for his first NBA bucket. It was just 2 points, 1 rebound, and 1 assist in a loss, but after everything Topic has endured, it felt like a massive, massive win. Welcome to the league. Coming up, are the Thunder slipping at the All-Star break? They did just get their breaks beat off by the Bucks. And do the Spurs have a real shot to dethrone them in the West? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.